Whakatakatahau ki te uru, whakatakatahau ki te tonga, kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tā. Yana, ata kura, he tio, he hoka, he hauhu, ti hei mauri ora. Well, welcome everybody to the Grants Committee meeting. It's our last one for the year. I want to particularly welcome Councillor Pennant, who's no longer a member, but obviously had withdrawal symptoms and is back. And also Kim Fowle, who's our new, actually, I don't really know his title, but ELT member with responsibility for the Grants Committee is the most important thing on his agenda, obviously. We do have some apologies. We have apologies from the Mayor, and I think everybody else is here now. So I move that the apologies be accepted. Do I have a second? Oh. I will, in the spirit of this time of year, add Councillor Young's apologies for lateness as well. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Foon, thank you very much. Now you all know what to do. If you're in favour, press green. Excellent. I'm anticipating this is going to be carried. Yes, excellent. That's carried. Thanks, everybody. Are there any conflict of interest declarations that people would like to make? No. All good. We'll then move on to the minutes of the last meeting. I move that we accept those minutes. Do I have a seconder? Councillor O'Neill. Thank you. Press green if you're in favour. That's carried. Thanks, everybody. Now, there aren't any items not on the agenda, so we move on to public participation. And do we have Kyla Rayner? Lovely. Good morning, Kyla. Welcome to our meeting. You have up to 10 minutes, and if you could include time for questions on that, that would be appreciated. Thanks, Kyla.
Wonderful. Thank you for having me. Talofa lava. Kia ora, everyone. My name is Kyla Rayner, and I am the General Manager here at Wellington Wright Crisis. Thank you for the opportunity to present to your panel. We have been the grateful recipient of funding from the Wellington City Council probably ever since community funding became available, and we hustled for that money. So we should start this presentation. Thank you for the support from the council, and we appreciate the ongoing and continued support. We've put in an application to fund a piece of our work that I'm incredibly proud of. It is a group therapy program for survivors entitled The Journey of Connection. And what might be useful for the council to hear is a little bit about who we are, the work we've done, and the service that we provide to the Wellington community. So Wellington Rape Crisis was established in the late 70s. We have been operating and serving survivors in this region for over 40 years now. And we started, as many of organisations like us did, as a group of really passionate people committed to ending violence and committed to providing safety for the people impacted by violence. Over the years, we've grown and we've professionalised somewhat while continuing to remain stern and strong advocates for survivors. And so these days we provide, we have a team of qualified and registered social workers, qualified and registered counsellors and psychotherapists who are all specialist sexual violence practitioners. And we've been adding more and more work streams to our work over the last sort of 3 years. Since sort of 2017, where we saw the impact of the #MeToo movement, we saw a really big societal shift in the way we became more comfortable with talking about the prevalence of this harm in our communities. And we were able to talk and become more on the same page with the groups that fund us, like local government and central government. And our community also became more aware of this issue and more aware of the support services that they are worthy and deserving of accessing. Since that time, we have seen a significant increase in demand for our services year on year. The council will know in the reports that we provide back annually, just in the last year, we saw a 69% increase in those accessing us for social work. We saw a 72% increase in those accessing us for counselling. And we saw a 180% increase in people accessing us as a drop-in centre. So sort of feeling us out and feeling out, whether this was the right and safe and appropriate place for them to address some of the harm that was impacting their ability to thrive in this community. So in the last year, this has also been, with the backdrop of a COVID-19 pandemic. And interestingly, we just continue to see that increase in demand every single year, despite our ability to receive more funding from central government, receive more funding from our very generous community. Unfortunately, we're always in a position where we seem to be continuously chasing the demand. In the last 3 years, we've grown our staffing numbers by 400%. We've increased our physical space by 100% in order to try and just capture all of the people that are kind of bravely accessing that service for the first time. All of the research shows us that that first contact that a survivor makes is really critical in terms of what that response looks like. And it may come of no surprise to many of you that alongside this, we also have significant workforce capacity issues. So we don't have enough people, enough skilled specialist practitioners to serve all of the people that are coming through looking for healing and recovery. So this group, Journey of Connection, is in direct response to that increased demand. Over the last year, we've had 100 people in our community on a wait list for therapy. We run a really integrated social work service. So our goal is that none of those people are sitting alone waiting for months on end, that they are receiving a therapeutic intervention from their social workers. But certainly for us, that's not enough. And we needed to think of more kind of transformational and innovative ways to reach more people and provide that healing and recovery when people are asking for that response. So we have really committed, talented and dedicated staff, and I gratefully received a proposal from my team for this group program where one of our skilled counsellors has partnered with a social worker to design an evidence-based multidisciplinary approach to a group work for people. We know that group work enables us to work with more people at one time. And also we've known as a service that there has been a real desire and appetite from our survivors for group work, for coming into a peer space. We also know that when we continue to see people in rooms by themselves, that this can unintentionally provide an individualizing of an experience that we know is not a medical problem, that we know is not some random thing that happened to them, but actually is really critically linked to our collective understanding of what well-being and safety is, and is critically linked to the shame and silencing that survivors feel. So when we just continue to see people in little rooms, in some ways we just reaffirm to them that this is a secret. Whereas the beauty of group work is that they suddenly realize, oh, this isn't my ugly experience. It has only happened to me due to something that I've done. And it is a powerful way to recapture people's mana, to link them with other people. And it also empowers those people to speak about those experiences in a way that is providing a better response to those that they're meeting who have also experienced this harm. So we know that survivors are going to benefit from the content that we have really crafted for them. They have 10 sessions together looking at different topics, and some of those topics might be specifically about that harm, but some of them are about how might this shape the way we parent? How might this shape the way we show up in our workplace? How might this shape the way we act as community members? So they're certainly receiving not only a therapeutic intervention, but there is some psychoeducational work happening there as well that we know is going to be fundamental to creating the shift that we need to see in Aotearoa to stop this kind of harm. We also know that when people do this work in our program, they are going to benefit from our wraparound service of social work, counselling and the justice support service we offer, supporting survivors to navigate that sometimes harmful and definitely confusing criminal justice system. We also know that this is going to have a direct impact on the 100 people waiting for therapy. It's going to have a direct impact on mitigating some of the wait times that people are experiencing. And also, I know I'm a Samoan woman who also is involved in some National Pasifika specialist service steering groups and networks, that this also might be a better pathway for some of us who perhaps the individual counselling is not the most appropriate cultural fit. So we know that we might be able to reach more people who maybe traditionally would not consider accessing one-on-one therapy. So it might be a more cultural fit, a better cultural fit for some groups, and perhaps a better fit for other demographic groups as well in our community. I think one of the most exciting pieces or outcomes for all of us in doing this type of work is the fact that when people do this type of program and they experience that collective healing journey together, they become really passionate and inspired about safety and well-being. And I feel really confident that those people are going to go on to be the champions and change makers in their homes, in their schools, in their workplaces. And we know that we are unable to respond to every single survivor. We're unable to meet the demand, when we think about the reality of this harm that is out there. So it's actually critical that we are passing on our expertise to all New Zealanders who want to get on board with our mission to eliminate sexual violence, and that those people are going to go out there and provide better responses to people and their families who disclose. They're going to change the way they parent. They're going to change the way they look at really unhealthy relationships and the other kind of systems that they work in. And that is going to be critical to us all working together to create the type of Wellington that we know that we all want to live in. I also wanted to share with you, I don't have a lot more to say about the group, and I welcome any questions. How are we doing for time?
Yeah, we've got about 45 seconds.
45, well, actually I did have a lot to say, but if I could end with a quote, I would like to bring a survivor into the room, because I'm incredibly proud of the work that we do, and I hope that you also feel proud as our local central government funding body. But this is why we're here. So this is a quote from someone who's used our services. This person has said, "The most significant change for me is hard to put down to just one thing. I feel like I can now rest, be vulnerable, find strength, be intimate, manage triggers, set boundaries, and understand my own boundaries and values in ways that I've never before. I have really hard waves, whether these waves are inside me or around me, but now I have a whole new confidence to work through these waves and a grounding, feeling like everything is going to be okay. And it feels like I'm finally coming home for the first time in forever." So, whawhataitele lava, mole awanoa, thank you for this opportunity, and happy to take questions if I have any time.
Thank you so much, Kyla. Thank you very much for that, and thank you for all the work that you do. And please know that around this table there is a lot of support for your work, and actually a lot of background and history with rape crisis among many members. So yeah, thanks so much for your work, and thanks for coming in today.
Thank you so much.
Cool. I'd now like to introduce or welcome Alexander Wright from the woodworking community. Is Alexander there?
Kia ora, yes. I'm just not that swish at Zoom, but...
no problem. So welcome, and even though we can't see you, we can hear you. And you've got 10 minutes, and if you'd like to leave some time for questions in that 10 minutes, please do. We can see you now.
Thanks for that. Kia ora, ko Alexander aho. I'm here to just talk about the Bench Space Initiative and our application for some seed funding to the Waste Minimisation Fund, along with Emma Nang and Sam Keir. Emma has joined our group recently because since lodging our application, we actually had a peer review evening to an invited audience of about 20 guests. And Emma was amongst them, and she has kindly offered her support to the initiative, particularly around looking over funding applications and so on. So she's kindly joined us on Zoom today too. Sam and I have been woodworking friends for about 12 years, and we're part of a collective of woodworking friends. And in the last couple of years, we've met some new people who've joined our group, and we've focused in on an initiative which we're calling Bench Space. That's evolved even in the time since lodging the application, because it's met with a favourable reception as a more of an overarching brand for what we're about and what we want to do, which I'm going to just talk briefly for 2 or 3 minutes, and then we'll perhaps go straight to some questions. And probably 2 minutes down. Now, we've identified a need for space to support craft culture and run courses in the Wellington central area. I've got a few notes. Forgive me, I'll just refer to those while I'm talking. We're aware of how much material is currently wasted, and craft practice is all about appreciating that material. We appreciate what's gone before, and we contribute to culture in a practical manner. We handle materials responsibly. That's a craft ethic. We actually have established a mentor relationship with Kāwai, and Matt looked over what we're doing. He said, basically, I see you guys on the same trajectory as Kāwai, doing with wood waste what we do for food waste. So we're talking about different waste streams. The material that's generated in the new construction is one thing. There's material that's generated when buildings are currently sadly demolished rather than dismantled. And then there's also what we call urban lumber, which is when a tree may need to be taken out. For example, the holm oak that was next to the Newtown Community and Cultural Centre. And instead of that being cut up and shipped and sent to landfill, we're able to salvage that material and do useful and interesting things with it. And by growing this craft culture network within the community, we enable people to see that they can work with material sensitively, material that's to hand, rather than necessarily bringing in new materials from further afield. As I say, we had our peer review. Our next meeting is actually tomorrow evening, and we're already looking at expanding our group of really skilled volunteers who are we're working with Hearts and Minds at the moment, and we're looking to set up a trust or an incorporated society to further these aims and objectives. There are about 12 of us getting together tomorrow night. Perhaps that's just, I hope that's a good introduction. And we could field some questions.
Thank you so much. What a very interesting work that you do. And I'm really pleased you came along to tell us about it, because I hadn't quite appreciated the nature of it. So thanks so much. Does anyone have any questions? Councillor Foon.
I'm actually jumping in on Councillor Day's question, but I was having the same thought. Whereabouts are you currently practicing? Alex?
So I don't mind taking this. I'm Sam Keir. I'm obviously part of the group. So we currently have our own workspaces. We have our own workshops, but we recognise the fact that one, we have limited capacity within those spaces, and also we want to have a space which is welcoming, inclusive, and safe ultimately. So and also that's of a sufficient size that we're able to offer the kind of services and courses and build the community we want to and have it as a focal point. So we have our own spaces, and we do have opportunity to run a limited number of courses, and also to preach our general, to our encourage our general culture and achieve what we're doing. But in terms of the next steps, we really are looking for a space that we can share and progress more seriously with these, with our aims.
Yeah.
This project, can you describe a little bit about what the global movement is in this space for us?
Could I say something about that?
Go, please.
So I recently joined because I was really impressed by the community ethic that I saw when I went along to the peer review. And I think thinking about the purpose of this waste minimisation fund bench space really has the potential to deliver to the question of how can we empower people to participate in waste minimisation in as many ways as possible. And I think one really powerful way can be through the building of what bench space has described as our cultural base of craft knowledge, what Alexander was talking about. So that's really part of a bigger movement of worldwide of recognizing material intelligence, so knowledge of how things are made, what they are made of, how they work, as a really important and valuable type of knowledge or intelligence alongside other types of knowledge. And I think we see that and these ideas emerging through other movements that are really closely related, like the Right to Repair, which has got a lot of media coverage lately. So I think bench space is a really good example of how that gap that people currently feel can be met on the ground at a community level by providing a really welcoming access point for people like me, essentially, who maybe aren't currently woodworkers or don't have that much knowledge or access or resource to pick that up by themselves, a really welcoming access point to that type of knowledge.
Thanks, and Councillor Day.
Oh, kia ora. I love what you're doing. I'm the daughter of a woodworker. He no longer can do that, sadly, but I grew up with the smell of wood through the house, and it's got very fond memories of that. But my question is around, have you had any interaction with the men's shed? And unfortunately, the name doesn't actually do justice to it, because I know I'm actually a member of our local men's shed, and so, women are allowed to go. But I just wonder, they are actually partnering with various schools and things. We've got a really strong one in Tāua with a massive workshop, and I can see some opportunities to partner, because obviously they're not using the space all the time. Have you had any conversations, because obviously we've got other ones in the city as well?
Okay. Question? Oh, sorry, Sam. I was just going to say. I've actually been to visit the 2 Wellington men's sheds in the last few months, those are good get-togethers, and I can see how we can rub shoulders nicely. We've actually tasked some of our group to reach out and talk to all sorts of organisations who are working in this area, including Rekindling Christchurch, the Warren in Auckland, the Centre for Fine Woodworking in Nelson. We definitely don't expect to just suddenly land an amazing premise overnight, and we have run courses at schools before, like at Onslow College. So it's really good to hear that the Tāua men's shed is really going very well. Of course, as you can imagine, we are interested in diversity and inclusivity. So unfortunately, the men's shed branding leaves a little to be desired in some respects. So,
well, I guess I wonder, just as a follow-up to that, whether what Emma, I think, was saying, I'm struggling to read from here, my eyesight's not very good, was saying around, knowledge sharing, that one of the things I think that's really important is we have people in the community who have massive knowledge. Intergenerational sharing is a really important opportunity, and I guess my question is that whether you could provide some support with, some of these groups will, if they don't become more diverse, it will be hard to be sustainable. So whether that's something that you could bring and challenge.
It's an enormous aspect of what we want to do, and in fact, if we can't do it in that way, we don't want to do it. So the entire and sort of fundamental basis of our initiative is that we want that inclusivity. We want diversity, not only in terms of cultural, but also gender and everything to be addressed as part of what we're doing. And we feel that is a kind of is a cornerstone of what we're doing, and it definitely, the intergenerational aspect is a huge part, and it's incredibly important. And if we can't do it that way, then we essentially won't do it. So that's
really encouraging. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Sam and Emma and Alexander. That was just such a pleasure to hear about the work that you're doing, and a really fascinating insight. And it feels like the criteria for this fund are written with you in mind. So, yeah, thanks so much for coming in and for all the work that you do.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
I'd now like to invite Roxy. We got Roxy there from Kia Haumaru Personal Safety Education. Kia ora, Roxy.
Hello, koutou.
You've got 10 minutes as well. And feel
Sorry,
free to
I was
type
so
your questions.
excited.
You're all good.
Kia ora koutou, ko Roxy Corvus Takawengoa, ko Kaiarahi, or Kia Haumari Personal Safety Education, formerly known as Women's Self-Defence Network, Wahine Toa. I'm thanking you today for the opportunity to come and speak to the application that we've made. I just wanted to be able to really take the chance to talk about the actual scope and breadth and impact that our programming has on kōrero and wahine and persons of marginalised genders throughout Aotearoa. Our organisation is an intersectionally feminist organisation, and we work nationwide and have done for 30 years. Prior, we were funded by Oranga Tamariki, but unfortunately our funding is wrapping up, and this is the last 6-month period that we will be funding, which is why I'm making the applications for courses through Wellington City Council. I've sent through our Skills for Safety report as a supporting documentation, and that was prepared by a couple of researchers back in 2016 to support the mahi that we undertake. The first thing I wanted to speak to is we are a personal safety education organisation. When people hear personal safety education, the first thought is self-defence, martial arts. While our courses do have a significant physical self-defence aspect, arguably the most important aspect of our courses is the mana enhancing personal safety in terms of building up girls' self-confidence, breaking those systemic patterns of violence that carry down the intergenerational harm and the intergenerational patterns that we see time and time again happening to our kōrero and wahine, and all about interrupting and resisting the cycle of violence from perpetuating further. So we really are a primary frontline preventative agency. We work with girls and young women and persons of marginalised gender in school ages year 3 to 4, year 7 to 8, year 10 to 13, and then additionally we have the women's courses, which are targeted towards migrants, disability communities, LGBTQ communities, women living in an environment of a culture of violence, and rural wahine, as well as generalised women. What this means is that throughout the course, we work with these women and girls, and we teach them not only physically how to keep themselves safe, but how to recognise sexual and family abuse. A lot of the time, abuse is so normalised that the course attendees don't even realise that they're in an abusive relationship. They don't even realise that the things that are happening to them should not be happening. We teach them strategies for recognising, resisting and responding to specific violence and abusive events. Disclosing abuse is a huge part of our courses, especially for the in-school and tertiary institution courses. We create and provide a safe space for women and girls to disclose what's happening to them in their daily lives, and then we take the reins, we take it over for them, and we assist them to get the help that they need through our disclosures process. For a little bit of context of the scale that we work at, in the last 6-month period, we had projected to have 18,200 participants on our courses. Unfortunately, we did not achieve that number due to COVID lockdowns. On average per year, that is 36,400 people who are being given the primary tools to maintain the safety of themselves, people in their communities, and their children. For the women, you know, it's along with the disclosures, even with the subsequent lockdowns, we received 80 plus disclosures of serious abuse occurring to girls and women. And we've taken those disclosures, we've acted on them, we've offered support, and we've changed the trajectory of those individuals' lives and given them the tools they need to live in a safer society for themselves. We enhance people's mana. We work with the Māori that is languishing, their inherent sense of self, the way that the cycle of abuse really breaks down the essence of a woman and the essence of a girl. And we come in with proven, scientifically proven, accredited measures to help rebuild these women and help rebuild these girls and give them the help that they need. So I just really wanted to speak to the social, psychological and emotional aspects of our course, because I do believe that simply categorizing us as a self-defense, physical self-defense network is not complete. The network has been in operation for 30 years, and over that time we have helped hundreds of thousands of girls and women and persons of marginalised gender throughout Aotearoa. We operate from the very bottom of the South Island right to the top of the North Island, so we have a wide coverage. Our head office is in Wellington, and I'm seeking funding for the for 50 women's and women in tertiary institutions and persons of marginalised gender courses to be run in Wellington, to hopefully tide us over while we manage to get more sustainable funding. So I'd like to open up for some questions. If there's anything I can clear up for you, please do let me know.
Oh, thanks so much, Roxy, and thanks for going into that level of detail about the philosophy and approach to your work, because it's very helpful for us to hear that. We do have a question from Councillor O'Neill.
Kia ora, Roxy. Thank you so much for the work that you're doing. The office's response to the application was that many other self-defence courses are run throughout Wellington, but just having a quick Google, a lot of them don't seem to be geared towards women and gender diverse communities. So I just wonder if you could give us your insight on, I guess, the diversity of what those courses offer and the gap that your services filled, or if there are any other services that target women and gender diverse communities.
Of course. So with I'll speak primarily to the adults courses because that's what's included in the funding application. With the adults courses, our target criteria is wahine Māori, migrants, disability communities. So we have a lot of, for example, blind, low vision courses that we run. We have built into every step of the course education process a way to make it accessible for every single segment of community. So we have kaiako who teach disability-specific courses for those with limited mobility. We have specific kaiako that come in and teach to, we've had someone just in this last round go and do a course for individuals with dementia, because that is a huge segment of the population that's extremely at risk of violence. So we have all these specific targeted segments. We also have offerings of courses to be run fully in te reo, kura kaupapa, and those are held by specifically trained Māori kaiako. All of our kaiako are accredited to a national standard. We are the only nationally accredited network of personal safety education providers in Aotearoa. And in terms of the women's courses, quite often we will target a specific audience and run a course specifically for them. So in terms of wahine Māori, we'll hold that course at an accessible location like a marae, and we'll work in with local iwi, local whānau, to the communities sort of, they work with us very closely to make sure that we can access segments of the population that we wouldn't naturally have access to. So it's a very community-led approach. All of the courses are fully funded. There are no additional costs to attendees. We provide $300 to pay for babysitting, transport, kai, whatever the participants need to be able to get to the course and get that life-saving education. So we really try and remove as many barriers as possible to serve our targeted networks. With the rainbow courses, they've been developed specifically using gender-neutral language with the specific specific knowledge of that community. I myself am a member of the rainbow community. I was formerly chair of Wellington Pride for about 5 years. So I've worked in with them to give the insight that's needed for the specific challenges that each community faces. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Roxy, and thanks for sharing, as I say, the detail and nature of your work, because it is helpful for us to hear that. So thanks for coming in today and for the work that you do. Our final public participant is Drew James from the Creative Capital Arts Trust. Do we have Drew there? Hey.
Hello.
Morena Drew. You've got 10 minutes and you know the drill. If you would like to leave some time for questions, please feel free.
Well, firstly, thank you for having me speak. Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Drew James, taku ingoa, ko Chief Executive, Creative Capital Arts Trust. Thank you for the opportunity to present on the Living Wage Events Fund criteria. We really applaud this investment in our arts practitioners to be paid minimum living wage. Creative Capital Arts Trust is a charitable trust that produces New Zealand Fringe Festival, Cuba Duper, and more recently Classical on Cuba. Creative Capital Arts Trust is committed to pay at least the living wage for all our employees and contractors since 2019. This has meant that we've had to raise significant additional funds to meet our obligations. We've increased minimum payments to musicians in Cuba Duper, as an example, from $100 per person per 45-minute slot. So with a band of 10, that adds up, through to $150 per person per 45-minute slot in 2022. We'd like to bring your attention to a particular sector of arts workers, those who are emerging independent arts practitioners. This sector are those who are in the challenging space between, say, graduating from a tertiary institution and getting their work to a point where they're able to gain funding from Creative New Zealand or being selected for creative festivals such as the New Zealand Festival of the Arts or Cuba Duper. This is a space where upcoming artists need to experiment in developing their work in the world outside the support of tertiary institutions, and is often that period becomes a career maker or a career breaker. This sector contributes hugely to an innovative, inclusive and creative city of Wellington. They are the artists that perform at BATS, Te Auaha and New Zealand Fringe Festival at various activated venues around the greater Wellington region, but do so at their own risk. They often form informal collectives and may apply for limited funds from Wellington City Council, Arts and Culture Fund and New Zealand Fringe Kākano funding, but generally pay themselves from the net proceeds of box office income shared between the collective. They have to prioritise venue costs, technical costs, marketing costs as first call on box office, and often there is very little left. New Zealand Fringe is a non-curated open access festival. The kaupapa of the festival has developed over 33 years in Wellington and is part of the World Fringe Network. Fringe festivals have proliferated around the world and in New Zealand and meet a demand from emerging independent practitioners to create a platform for their work. For 2022, the New Zealand Fringe has a record-breaking 189 artist registrations, representing over 1,500 individual participating artists. The New Zealand Fringe is focused on providing an umbrella for these artists with an extensive festival marketing campaign, including a festival program and website, a ticketing service, coordination with venues, providing an extensive artist capability and development workshop program, and through the Kākano funding, a $50,000 fund provided by Creative New Zealand. For 2022, we received 64 applications for Kākano, resulting in 52 awarded applicants. This funding is focused on costs that are incurred by artists that would make a difference to their success in presenting their work. However, it does not even come close to being able to provide enough funding to ensure that artists are able to pay themselves a living wage out of their box office proceeds. This emerging independent arts practitioner sector who participate in the New Zealand Fringe Festival do not clearly fit the criteria of staff and contractors who are directly employed to deliver, produce and perform at the events that are in the criteria. And we would argue that this sector is a priority for support. We'd like to recommend that the criteria is adjusted a little. I'm suggesting that we would have something like provide support for events being delivered in Wellington City, to provide living wage for their staff, contractors and registered participants who are directly employed, contracted or registered to deliver, produce and perform at these events. Thank you for your time, and very happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Drew. Thanks for coming in, and also thanks for drafting an amendment for us. That's very helpful. Usually, usually people don't go to that degree of commitment, so that's particularly welcome. Does anyone have any questions for Drew? Councillor Foon.
Yes, could you forward the amendment through, please?
Could you send us your wording? Yeah, we'll start calling you councillor soon. All right, thanks so much for coming in, Drew. That was genuinely very helpful to get that insight, and I think you're likely to see some change and some evidence that we've listened. So thanks very much for coming in, and thanks for all the work that you do.
Okay.
Hope you get a summer break. All right, everybody, that's the end of our public participants. Now, I'm not going to we won't have morning tea now. We'll press on a little bit and see how we get on, and then we can make a call. So now we will move on to the review of the Built Heritage Incentive Fund and the new proposed Heritage Resilience and Regeneration Fund. I'd like to welcome Mark Lindsay to introduce the report. And obviously you can assume, particularly with this diligent group of councillors, that everybody has read it. So if you just kind of want to highlight a couple of things, and then if there's some questions, we can get onto those. And of course it is, this isn't council's last chance to look at this fund. It will come up again at the next committee stage.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Morena Koto, Mark Lindsay, Heritage Manager for the Council. So just briefly to introduce the paper, broadly speaking, there's two main drivers here that are causing us to look and repitch the Built Heritage Incentive Fund, which has been a successful fund, but we need a bigger purpose that we think we've defined in the paper here. So there are about 104 district plan listed heritage buildings in the city, which are rapidly approaching the 2027 Building Act statutory deadline for strengthening in the city. Costs are increasing for those building owners within the construction industry. Support is reducing. The Ministry for Culture and Heritage Equip Fund has been cancelled. That put about $2 million into Wellington heritage buildings in its time. There are multiple market barriers that we're aware of, building owners around regulatory and technical supply chain issues and so on and so forth. The BIF is slow and inflexible as it stands now in helping us to prioritise and target the building owners who are most in need. It is a reactive fund, so we don't have the opportunity to be on the front foot, looking at the data, looking at the market, as it were, for those buildings, and very proactively responding to the needs of the building owners in very specific fashion. It doesn't address the greatest needs, and it tends to be monopolised by building owners who are in the know, who know how to work the funding system, rather than those who don't and may have greater needs. The money is spent very thinly. What we're proposing in respect of the earthquake strengthening is that the targeted approach we have here, the flexible funding approach we've had here, will over time enable us to strengthen more buildings sooner, higher priority buildings faster, and to proactively target the priorities and to work with those owners. So we'll have flexible and targeted finances, we'll have a case management approach, we'll be able to facilitate partnerships, and this is an established model, most conspicuously successful in the Dunedin waterfront warehouse refurbishment project. We've looked closely at that. Heritage New Zealand has written that up as a case study model, which we'll follow. The second driver is around the opportunity that the BIF provides us to actually do a broader positioning in an urban regeneration sense of looking at where council is investing in other infrastructure investments through the cycleways network, through Let's Get Wellington Moving, through precinct-based urban design investments and changes such as Te Aro area or laneways, and saying, how can we use this fund to help support a broader urban regeneration opportunity that might provide. So heritage buildings offer tremendous economic uplift where they're publicly accessible buildings, where they're tenanted, where they have commercial purposes, and there's a lot of them are languishing in the city at the moment. So we can tie these different investment streams together to some extent to get a broader development opportunity there. And again, the precedent we can look at is the Heritage England's High Street project, where they are looking at the rundown high street areas in a lot of the small rural towns across the UK and working with multiple partners to bring back urban vitality through economic uplift, through different uses of these buildings, tied up with a broader investment and regeneration agenda. So there's elements of that we intend to drive through this process. And one of the key elements within the paper is the proposal that officers have delegated authority up to $100,000 to spend that money. And that will be very much about us facilitating specific negotiations and contracts and partnerships in multi-year, potentially multi-year, potentially multi-party type of contracts. And that flexibility just enables us to manage those types of arrangements much more easily than is available under the BIF now.
Cool, thank you. Are there any questions for Mark? Councillor Young.
Mark, thank you. That was very helpful and a really good paper too. Thank you for that. Just wondering, could you send us a link to the copy of the Dunedin case study?
Yes.
Please, thank you.
Councillor Pennant.
Thank you. Good paper.
Thank you.
So just on accessibility, we've been talking about getting our city housing to be more proactive on that front. I'm just wondering if we can make sure that the BIF work is lined up with that. And I appreciate it's difficult because I once supported dispensation for a heritage building not to do the lift work because of the financial challenges. It's not easy, but I think we need to lift our game. So are you able to put a bit more emphasis on that when you're talking to owners?
Can do that?
Yeah.
Certainly.
Okay. This fund will be non-contestable. That was just the only question I had because even though obviously I'm not necessarily a believer in competing on everything because everyone's got needs, does that mean that it's not as transparent and who's going to miss out as a result?
There's an element of that. We will be working more closely with the market, the building owners. We will know them better. We'll have much better data on them, so they will know about the availability of the fund through our engagement with them in a way that we don't now. And a key element of that is that we are working with the resilience team and council who are doing a major data gathering survey exercise now of all of the 500 earthquake-prone buildings in Wellington. The heritage buildings are a subset of that. So we'll have much more granular data about who those owners are. So we'll be opening discussions with the totality of the communicating to all of that market and giving the opportunities for them to come forward and have discussions with us, as well as us proactively targeting them. So it'll be a much more transparent process.
But there will be reporting, I think, Councillor Fitzsimons, and I just note that I will support Councillor Fitzsimons on the governance arrangements. I don't want chairs just to be approving. And just the last question is, so look, we've obviously, as I keep saying, we've got some very tight deadlines, less than 6 years now for owners to get done. So do you think with only $500,000 that you can get at least the owners that you're working with or have had some contact with council over the line by 2027?
I can't commit to whether we can do that or not because there's too many variables. This is an incentive fund. We know every year it's 200 to 350% oversubscribed, so there is always far more demand for funding than we can provide. And as I say, costs are going up. And the other point, which is part of the graph on page 6 of the paper, is that a lot of those buildings are entering the high capital costs phase of the strengthening now. So the demand is actually rising for funding for that. So it's a simple formula of if there were more money, we would have more certainty of getting more buildings over the line before that deadline. At the moment, we certainly can't say that we're going to achieve that.
Councillor Young.
Sorry, supplementary. It just occurred to me, so in Britain, if you have a heritage property and you need to do work, you can get your VAT back, which is the equivalent of GST, providing it's done by, registered builders and that kind of thing. Do you know if there's been any thought about that sort of scheme over here?
The Ministry of Culture and Heritage has looked at a number of incentive schemes over the years. I don't think there's any specific work being done on that at the moment. There is work being done on better heritage protection under the new RMA, under the review of the RMA. I can follow that up and find out if they've looked at.
I mean, one of the interesting things is registered builders tend to be more expensive than the fly-by-night guys, but you also know you're getting a better quality of work. So it actually has, I mean, there are a few ramifications, but it's very appealing if you have a heritage property.
Yeah, there are a large number of different types of tools and incentives that could be applied in New Zealand, which aren't, particularly financial tools and incentives.
Cool, thanks. If there are no other questions, I'll ask Councillor Young to move the paper.
Well, I'm delighted to move it. I mean, this is a fraught area. I'm so glad I don't live in a heritage property. I have done, and they are incredibly expensive to do anything to. So I think this is a really good practical paper, and Councillor Pannett has, spent her time on council dedicated to this sector. I applaud the heritage people becoming section becoming more nimble. I think that's fantastic. I would just also ask you to remind you to be pragmatic as well, because sometimes things aren't quite as easy to do when you're doing them nowadays as opposed to when you're building them originally, but we do like to have flush lavatories and things like that. Anyway, I'm very pleased to move this paper. I think it's a great step forward in a very difficult sector.
Thank you, and I'll second it. Are there any speakers? Councillor Pannett.
Just really briefly, look, I'd like to thank officers for this, and I think it's a good thing for this committee to support that we will have that more targeted response. We know that we've got 3 main heritage areas, so it makes sense to take in terms of Courtney, Cuba and Rutherford Street, so it makes sense to take a more collective approach. Officers have responded to my concerns that there will still be money available for just individual buildings, which may have special significance. Just on the points that I raised, Councillor Fitzsimons and Councillor Matthews, I'm sure, no amendments, but really around accessibility, we do need to, and it is not easy with heritage buildings and access at all. It's really complex, but we just need to put a bit of pressure on there. I will be looking in the report back around the contestability, just to making sure that I'm just a bit uncomfortable about that, so I just think we need to keep a bit of an eye on that. And also, look, the biggest issue is, I think this fund should be bigger. We just have to crack into those earthquake-prone buildings, get them publicly safe, and, able to make a contribution for many years ahead. But we'll see how the team goes, and I wish them the best of luck, because definitely not an easy issue. Councillor Young, your suggestion is incredibly practical, so we should take that to the government. But given that they took funding away from heritage building owners, which is not very helpful. But anyway, good, and thank you very much for all the work.
Cool. Councillor Day.
Just briefly, I really want to thank the staff for this paper. It's really good to see, where we can head with this. And I am pleased to see the report back, and that's mainly because I think it's really important that we are aware as decision makers as to the challenges that you're facing with what comes in, so that we understand where there might be gaps and where things are that we might be able to support with, and how the funding in general is going. So I think that will be really helpful. But really pleased that you can go on and get on with this. So thank you.
Are there any other speakers? All right, well, I just will briefly say that I have some scepticism about this fund, but I'm absolutely committed, obviously, to it. It exists, and we should make the best of it and make it work in the best way for the city. And I think, Councillor Pennant, the trade-offs that you talk about around accessibility are probably not acceptable anymore, so we probably wouldn't do that anymore. And I'd actually welcome some work between now and the council meeting on an amendment which firms that up. I think it's a good idea. I'm also a little bit uneasy with the grants under 100k being approved by the business manager, just because I think that bringing them to this committee did give us some oversight and understanding of what was going on, and kind of connected us with residents. But I see accept the additional requirement that officers report to the grants committee twice yearly. So we will have that sort of oversight and understanding, and hopefully it will allow just a bit more flexibility to make the fund work a bit better. So on that basis, I'm happy to approve it. So all those in favour, please press green, and those against red. And then we will break for morning tea. you'll be pleased to know. And that just gives us a chance to work with Drew on that wording around the Living Wage Fund too. Yeah, we're giant today. Thanks, everybody. And that has carried. And we'll now break for morning tea. back, everybody. We'll get underway on our next paper, which is the Living Wage for Events Fund Criteria. We've got Mark and Jenny to introduce the report. As I say, take it as read. If there's anything you particularly want to highlight, please let us know.
Councillors, I just wanted to make some brief comments to introduce this paper, the purpose of which is to try and get non-council events paying people a living wage. I'd just like to acknowledge Meredith Blacker and Beth Kitely and Marlon Drake from the Living Wage Coalition, who worked with us on the formation of these criteria. You'll note that we did talk to quite a lot of events people and a lot of people involved in the sector, so we counselled lots of ideas for this paper. And there was very strong feedback around including artists, event producers, as well as the people like the cleaners and security guards that are involved with events. So we've deliberately kept the criteria very broad and placed the onus on the applicants to provide us with information about how they'll meet the criteria. And the only other thing I just wanted to say was that we're asking you to approve the delegation to the chair and the chair of the full committee in between the cycle of the grants meetings, because of course the grants subcommittee doesn't meet again until March, so we're keen to try and approve some funding for some of these organisations that may have events that are happening during the summer months, so that's why we're doing that. And of course the paper then goes on to Councillor Day's committee tomorrow, and there are some public participants booked in for that meeting too. So that's all I had to say.
Thanks, Mark. Are there any questions? No, I'll hand over to Councillor Matthew. Oh, sorry, Councillor Phone.
Mark, just one question was around the potential risk that it was undersubscribed. Did you think that was a possibility?
I think this is an unusual fund for us because normally, and I know we worked with the chair on drafting some of these criteria, we started off trying to restrict lots of things, but the heart of this fund is meant to be about just helping events become living wage. And what I've been saying to people is, if you stood up on the stage at the start of your event and said, we're a living wage event, what would it take for you to do that? So we've kept the criteria very broad, and we're going to do quite a lot of direct promotion with some of those organisations that we already have funding relationships with. You know, so Creative Capital Arts Trust is a good example of that. So, Councillor Foon, I really don't know until we get to be later on in the year. We have the opportunity over the summer to approve some things. And then obviously we've got grants meetings in March and May. So I think there's probably opportunity for us to get some applications through.
Lovely. If there's no other questions. Councillor Matthews.
Yes, I had a question. Yes, my question was just about officer advice about the amendment that Drew suggested, and they're comfortable with that?
Very comfortable with that. I don't have a problem at all.
Yeah, have you seen it, Councillor Matthews? We've been chatting about it here, but have you got it there? It's amend the criteria so it includes participating artists in addition to staff and contractors. So that amendment will come through tomorrow when we consider this again, if it's passed today. Cool, Councillor Matthews, I'll ask you to introduce the paper.
Yes, kia ora koutou. I won't speak for very long. Obviously, for those, the majority of my colleagues, we made a pledge at the last local government elections to sort of extend the living wage beyond what we do ourselves as a council, and to really kind of play a leadership role within the city. And this fund will help us to achieve it. It's really great to get to this point. I'd like to thank officers. Thank you for the work that you've done, Mark and team. It's been really good. And I think that broadness, you know, we are doing something different. And I'm excited about that. But it has been done around the world. And the example, obviously, of the London Olympics is we're not quite at that stage, but it would be good to get there, wouldn't it? I wanted to thank Living Wage Wellington, thank Marlon for his support for this as well, and all of the Living Wage local organisations and employers. And it was really great to see Drew, and I think that is a good sign that he was so engaged in the detail. It was like, well, how can we, you know, who needs this and how do we get into it. And I guess I just want to make the final point that, the minimum wage is catching up to the living wage, and there are calls for that to happen at an even kind of to match those two. And I guess I would see it as a sign of success if this fund didn't need to exist after a year or 2 years or 3 years, because the living wage was so broadly paid, or was actually the minimum standard within Wellington. So yeah, I think that would be a good thing if we didn't need to do it, and then we could think about doing something else. Thank you.
Lovely, thanks Councillor Matthews, and I'm going to second it. And I just did want to acknowledge you, Councillor Matthews, and your leadership on the living wage movement. Well before you were a councillor, you were a core part of that movement in Wellington and a leader within it. And I just want to thank you on behalf of all those workers that you have changed the lives of, because there is a really direct correlation between that campaign and changing the lives of working people in Wellington in particular. So I did want to really acknowledge that, and the fact that we have this is really a step towards this council taking another step towards making Wellington a living wage city. And I think Wellingtonians will really embrace this, and it's going to be particularly lovely that a number of events will be able to proudly say that they are living wage events. We will have another chance to gush about you again tomorrow, Councillor Matthews, so I'll leave it there. Does anyone else wish to speak? You do get another chance. Councillor Young.
So, just like, so anyway, the thing is, I don't believe the living wage is something that local government should be involved in. I believe it's a central government role. However, we have committed to this fund, and I can think of no better sector than the very underpaid sector of the artists. And as Drew said, it's the artists and the staff and the contractors. However, Madam Chair or Chairwoman or whatever you call people these days, I do take exception to your saying that the living wage changes the lives of working people, because that implies that the people on the living wage are the only ones who work in Wellington, and I think changing the lives of working people, some working people, just, editorial.
Okay.
Anyway, so the point is, I do support this, even though I don't support the living wage.
Councillor Fringe.
Kia ora. Also, thank you, Councillor Matthews, for your advocacy here. And yes, I actually really remember this moment in our long-term plan discussions. And so I know that many will be very excited about it. But I just also wanted to acknowledge Ahotini, and that if we really want to back our creative sector, this is a really good step that we are making to do that. So yeah, thank you to everyone for helping to get to this point.
Councillor Day.
Oh, kia ora. Thank you very much to everyone for their mahi on this. Thank you to the staff. It looks like a good process that we've got ahead of us. Thank you to Councillor Matthews for championing this and maybe making it so amazing that we won't need it for too long, hopefully. But I do think it's really important that while we have it, we make the most of that opportunity. So I do request that the chair maybe does a little bit of work, mahi, with staff to see if we can get the word out to our arts community to say this is an opportunity, because people are so busy with their heads down just getting on with the mahi that they might miss the chance to actually think this is something they could apply for. So whatever we can do to make it easier would be really good. So maybe a letter from the chair to our arts organisations that we work with would be very helpful. So I don't think that needs to be an amendment. I'm seeing the chair nodding, and I think people won't disagree with that. So let's do it.
Thanks, Councillor Day. Councillor Matthews, would you like a right of reply?
I just want to tell Councillor Young about the cleaner in the building of my last job that I had, who moved on to the living wage, and she knitted me a most beautiful scarf. It was the first thing she'd ever knitted anybody, and she gave it to me because she did help me kind of personally. So, obviously a lot of people are fortunate enough to earn more, but for those that move to the from the minimum wage to the living wage, it really does change their lives. Thank you.
Lovely.
Thanks for all your support, colleagues.
Thanks, Councillor Matthews. So all those in favour press green, and if you're against, you can press red. That's carried. Thanks, everybody. And just officers, maybe between today and tomorrow, you can have a bit of a think about those proactive steps that we could take, and we can make sure that we can advise councillors tomorrow about kind of what we'll do. I know there's some of it in the paper already, but I think it's a good suggestion from Councillor Day. All right, now we move on to the Arts and Culture Fund, and I welcome Sasha to the table. Yep. Hi, Sasha. Come on up. Have a seat. And Mark, lovely. Welcome, Sasha, and welcome to this work and to the council and to the grants committee. So I think you've heard the drill. Basically, if there's anything you'd like to highlight from the paper, please do, but you can assume that councillors have diligently read it and carefully considered it.
Kia ora koutou. I'll have Mark probably talk about the paper.
Kia ora, councillors. Yeah, this is the second Arts and Culture Fund round of the financial year, and obviously there's a large list of organisations there, and Sasha's stepped in the role of Senior Arts Advisor and has done a very thorough job on assessments. So we've been through a few rounds of discussions around applications here, and there is quite a list of recommendations. I think we just take the paper as read. I don't think there's anything we need to highlight in particular.
Cool. Councillor Day.
I've got a question, and it's just around the Professional Performing Arts Fund and how that fits in with this one. Like, is it clear to us when we're giving money from which fund? And it seems like there's some information in there that I don't understand about that fund and how it fits into the kind of the ecosystem. Is it always decided by the committee, or is it sometimes just decided by the staff?
So the Professional Performing Arts Fund is $100,000 this year. It was $75,000 the previous year, and that's coming from a different budget line than the actual Arts and Culture Fund. So effectively, it tops up the fund, and we work through the applications that fit with the criteria of that fund. So within these recommendations, there are projects, and in the comments, we've mentioned where it says Professional Performing Arts Fund. Now, usually, and I think last time, they were just cleanly from the Professional Performing Arts Fund, but some of them we funded from Arts and Culture and Professional Performing Arts Fund. So we put partially. So it would be easy enough for me to provide, like to separate that out and show you if you needed to see that. But this second round fully expends that 100,000. So that's all gone now if you approve these recommendations. So yeah.
Thank you, that's really helpful.
Cool. If there's no other questions, I'll ask Councillor O'Neill to move the paper.
Cool, thank you. It is my pleasure to move this paper to committee. I just wanted to thank both the officers that came and gave some really helpful context there. It's super exciting whenever we get to this point and meet the need identified in the community through the ahutene and child and youth friendly policy. This is the second of 3 funding rounds for the 21 and 22 period, and as Councillor Day has already pointed out, includes the annual Professional Performing Arts Fund. I move the paper.
Cool, and I'm happy to second. Are there any speakers? All right, we'll move on to voting then. That's carried. Thanks, everybody. So the next paper is the Waste Minimisation Seed Fund, and I'd like to welcome Jenny to come forward and introduce the paper. And I think you probably heard the drill. Just if there's anything you want to highlight, might be quite good to explain the changes from the printed paper to what we're considering today. Thanks, Jenny.
Okay. Kia ora koutou, ko Jenny Elliott, Taka Wingawa. So yeah, I'm the Waste Minimisation Officer and Manager, and it's my pleasure to present this paper for the Waste Minimisation Seed Fund over $2,000. So the paper provides officer recommendations for the allocation of the funding this year, and also outlines the process and priorities for administration of the Organics Fund. So we'll take the paper as read, but I just wanted to highlight a couple of changes that we've made to the officer recommendations since the paper was submitted. So you'll be aware that we had 12 applications this year. It was heavily oversubscribed. And accordingly, we had some conversation with Wonky. We'd originally been recommending that we funded them the full amount requested, which was $25,000. But actually, in conversation with them, we identified other ways that we could support them to achieve the same outcomes and also drop the amount of funding that we allocated to them slightly. And this has actually allowed us then to free up a bit of funding to support an additional project. So the additional project that we're suggesting or recommending funding for is Kāwai, which was a food waste reduction initiative to work alongside their composting programme. And with Wonky, what we've done is we've changed our recommendation that we would now fund them 12 months lease for a refrigeration unit, which will help them to expand the business at the moment, and also we will part fund a vehicle for them. And as part of the conditions of that, they've also agreed that they will offset all their carbon emissions. So that's very brief synopsis.
No, thanks, Jenny.
Any questions?
That's super helpful, actually. Councillor Fulton, question.
Just two broader questions that maybe kind of go across the whole grants fund that waste fits into. But the Everybody Eats Charitable Trust, I think they might have applied last time, but under the Social and Rec Fund. But I just really wonder about their organisation and what they're trying to do and how they fit and how council can best help them. So maybe not specifically for you, Jenny, maybe I'll pick that up offline and talk to Mark and Jenny about that. But also the one was about timing. So how do you feel about this fund? It's great that it's been oversubscribed, but what do you think it might look like if it was biannual, for example, so halve it and biannually? Or do you think it works better being an annual fund?
I'm comfortable with it being an annual fund at the moment, and certainly we're having conversations with applicants throughout the year,
right?
And making sure they're aware of the timing. And also sometimes, projects will come to us that actually would fit quite well with the small fund, and we can just, that's the one that the officers make decisions on, so we can push them through that. Or equally, if people come to us on the small fund and we think the project's a bit bigger, then we suggest that they hold off and apply to this one. My feeling is that it works fine at the moment, but obviously open to consider if there
was... Well, it's not broken.
Yeah.
Great, thanks.
Cool. There's no other questions. Councillor Phone, I'll ask you to introduce the paper.
Yay, well, it's always a good pleasure to give away money made from waste. But actually, I think today we've got some really wonderful projects that are just the exact kind of initiatives that I love seeing come out of Wellington. Just having the Wellington woodworking community in here, but really, bringing that innovation around repair and reuse. And we know that with our housing situation, there is a lot of waste going to landfill from C&D. So that's a really wonderful opportunity. And we're seeing the same movement in clothing. So like the way that people are now working on fixing their clothes as opposed to landfilling them. And also just want to express joy about the Repair Cafe with the Sustainability Trust. I did manage to get to the one we were involved with our tip shop crew a few months ago. And it's a movement in itself, but it probably needs a really regular timing for it to be successful and a thing that people think about rather than throwing things away. So the trust, I gather, will be able to make sure that that's a regular thing. And yeah, just exciting about Wonky that 90 tonnes of food waste they're aiming to take out of landfill. But I think again, these things aren't siloed, and we know from over lockdown that our food growers up in Horowhenua have really struggled to maintain business because the food can't come back to markets. So opportunities like this with a business that's taking, say, the seconds from these organisations and getting them out into the community and getting money back to the grower is a really important part of our whole food system, as well as the waste minimisation. So and excited about Tua Cafe's mug cycle library. Like all these initiatives are creating a really big movement. And also Non-Stop Solutions, Councillor Young, they are on that trajectory to help reusable dinnerware at all of our events. So yes, so that's what we're aiming for there. So it's little and often, but these companies doing a great job for Wellington and our reputation. So happy to move the paper.
Thanks, Councillor Foon, and I'll second it. And I just wanted to extend my thanks as well to the officers for the work on this. It's always fascinating hearing about things that are happening in the community, and I feel like this list of grants is a really good reflection of a lot of good work happening in Wellington. So I'm really pleased that you've been able to bring this to us, and thanks for the work that you've done with the groups that we're giving grants to today. Does anyone else wish to speak? Councillor Day.
Kia ora. This fund is really exciting because I think we see some of the most amazing innovations coming through and get to read about the kind of cutting edge things that people are doing to address some really actual simple problems, you know, like actually the particularly the woodworking community, like that's actually solving some really simple issues in the community, but in a way that gives people a lot of satisfaction. So it's really exciting to hear of the individual initiatives. And really excited about the Repair Cafe mahi. And, you know, I know as a child, I remember we used to be able to take things down to the repair shop in our community, and it just made sense. And it's really hard now when something breaks and you know that, you know, 98% of the item is fine and it just needs something small fix that you individually don't know how to do, but you know there's someone out there that does. And I think this is about that kind of connectivity that comes through creating these initiatives. And I also really just want to acknowledge the volunteering that goes into these organisations. Like, they all start with volunteers giving their time, and that's really important that there's a way that we can actually help them create business and industry out of it that means people can be paid to do it. So, you know, really find that exciting that, you know, we get it moving away from just expecting people to do this because they're being kind to their neighbour to fix something, that actually they can do it in a way that could mean they could be paid. So really excited, thank you.
Councillor Foon, did you need to write a reply?
Not at all.
Lovely. All right, we'll move on to voting then. You guys all know the drill. That's carried unanimously. Thank you, everyone. We'll now move on to the Social and Recreation Fund, and I'll welcome Mark and Jenny back to the table. You know, so anything you'd like to highlight from the report?
Not from the report, but just to note that, as before, this is the second of 3 rounds. We're recommending for 148,000 this round, which leaves 125k for the next round next year. And also to note that this round is the last round from the old priorities. As of next year, we have set the new priorities to align with the social wellbeing framework and the children and young persons strategies. So they will be on the website very shortly. That's all.
Thanks so much. Are there any questions? Councillor Young.
So, Jenny, thank you. Can you just remind me, what happened to Mount Cook Residents Association? Did they miss the ball on their application for their $1,000 grant, or?
We've not had an application from them this year for their $1,000, so they can apply in March next year. I mean, I can contact them. They just haven't made an application.
But they can still apply this financial year.
Councillor Foon.
Just a question that around the funding of organisations that are already on our rolling funding. So, you know, I can see that there is a reason, but it would just be good to get a bit more of an explanation regarding that, please.
And so, in particular,
since Pablos.
So what we try to do is, if they're on 3-year contracts or multi-year contracts, we only look at things that fall outside those contracts for possible funding, and then when their contracts come up to renew, we relook at how we might address those shortfalls at the time.
Councillor Day.
So my partai is about the Kahurangi Friends Te Reo Club application. So I'm just aware that it's not always easy for the small community groups to access funding to do things like this, and I'm just wondering how we approach that one. You know, with thinking about te tauihu and trying to encourage te reo Māori use in the community.
Yes, it's a very hard one, and I think certainly we're wanting to focus more and more on te reo and all things te Māori, but we felt this was really around for a school and delivering of classes. Yeah, did you want to add anything?
I mean, it is a programme that runs with the school community more broadly, and I think it certainly is something we need to look at in the future. But, you know, I mean, it's always hard, isn't it? There's so much money, and we just had to work through what the priorities we saw were, really.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm not sure about the school community connection, whether that more just represents that it's a community that's quite strong and can support children outside of school as well. I'm just aware, like we had Te Mahuri that ran through Tawa and Newlands, and actually almost one of the challenges was that it found it hard to find the community to be able to really support it, because it takes a lot of energy from individuals to make sure that it becomes established and it gets going in a way that's sustainable. So
I'm more than happy to follow up with Kaharangi, Friends of Kaharangi, and look at how we can address and think of more innovative approach for next round.
That would be good, because my other question was just around if you're aware that they've applied for any other funding, because I'm aware that it's not an insignificant amount that they've asked for to run it. Are you aware if they've applied anywhere else?
I'm not, no.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Because it was a lot for us to be able to fund that ourselves. Yeah.
And Councillor Foon.
And one more query just on the House of Grace. I guess it was just, have they got other funding coming in from other sources?
Did you want to answer that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have funded the House of Grace before, and we did fund. You might recall we had all that COVID-19 money, so we bumped up funding for quite a lot of organisations through the Social and Recreation Fund. We've tended to support the House of Grace through, like the Izard Bequest or the Aspel Trust, and not generally through this fund. So I mean, it's like many of the applications we had last time where they'd had quite big grants and then they came back. So I think we'll be doing Izard in March. So I think that's probably an opportunity for them to come through.
And they're very well suited for that fund. Yeah.
So will we be able to communicate that with them? Yeah, great. Yeah. Thank you. Amazing organisation.
Thanks. It appears there's no other questions, so I'll ask Councillor Day to move the paper.
Oh, kia ora. Well, it's always a pleasure to move this paper, but also a little bit frustrating when you see how much money we can't give. 626,000 was applied for. I mean, it just shows the need that's always out there every time. And so I do want to acknowledge Eugenie and Mark for the wrangle that you have to go through to try and make this work, and to feel like, that we're not spreading it so thin that it doesn't make a difference. It's always that balancing act, isn't it? And looking down the list, so, that everyone is very deserving, and the organisations who aren't getting it are also very deserving, and want to acknowledge the mahi that they do as well. I think I really want to just thank Jenny for her comments around the new criteria coming, and the fact that we now have a wellbeing framework and a children and young people strategy. That's really exciting to be able to see that coming through and influencing the way that we make our decisions. And I do just want to speak to the Kahurangi Friends one. Having been involved in a te reo club in our community, and seeing the impact that it does make for the children is quite important. And I know that having been out and visited the school out in Strathmore and just seeing the community around there, it's pretty impressive. And actually for a lot of our children, it's a place where they feel safe, and that if it means that their learning can continue after school, and it actually brings parents in as well to include their learning, it's pretty powerful. So I hope we don't lose their energy with it, and I really appreciate you saying that we can do some follow-up, because I did, when I looked at the application, I thought it was really good, but I could see that there will need to be other inputs of funding as well to make it work. But I do encourage Kahurangi Friends to keep going, because this is the sort of way that we're going to see te reo Māori revitalised in our communities. So kia kaha and haere tonu. And so happy to move the paper.
Thank you, and I'll second it. And I did just want to echo the comments Councillor Day made to both you, Jenny, and you, Mark, for the work that you've put into this. But also, when we ask questions, we know that you're just giving us a taste of what you know about these organisations. And I think that part of the integrity that you bring to this table and to these decisions is your deep knowledge of what's happening in the community sector in Wellington. And that's very, very valuable for us as a committee, but also for us as Wellingtonians. So I did just really want to acknowledge that, and I know particularly through COVID that work has been widespread and meaningful, and that you won't know the extent of the impact that you've had. It will be much more than you realise. So yeah, thanks so much for the work that you do. Councillor O'Neill.
Thank you. I just briefly wanted to talk to the Kia Hau Maru application and the public participant we had today. Over the break, I had a quick chat to the officers, and Jenny has assured me that it is well aware with our staff that this is an incredibly important program and that it does a lot to deal with minimising harm and protecting people. And so officers have said to me that their team will look into advocating for the service and working with them through other initiatives that Council has to ensure that we have that we keep up the good work in this area. And I just also wanted to acknowledge Wellington Rape Crisis for all the work that they do, and that Wellington City Council will hope to give them continued support, but perhaps not through professional therapy services, but other services operating.
Thank you. Councillor Day, did you want to write a reply?
Yeah, I think I just wanted to quickly speak to that. Thank you, Councillor O'Neill, for raising that, because it is important to acknowledge the submitters from today, and actually the work that they do is really valued in the community, and not getting funding is definitely not an indication of the fact that we don't support that. And, we will always look for ways that we can. Of course, as we see, this is a highly oversubscribed fund, and, we do really want to urge our health providers to be supporting this sort of mahi, because it is so important. And one of the things that we're working really hard on as a council, I want to acknowledge the staff again, is on the harm prevention that we're doing, and we must be really focused on that. And I think it's important that these organisations all play a part together, but we want to make sure that we're making our funding be the most effective it can possibly be. But yeah, these organisations, there are ways that we can support, and we should continue to, and it's really helpful that staff can help advocate for the work that they do, because it is just so deeply needed and very very well thought through. And I think it's important that we support that in every way that we can. So thank you very much for raising that. I really appreciate you doing that, Councillor O'Neill. But yeah, let's vote.
Thanks, everybody. Indeed, let's vote. And that's carried unanimously. Thanks, everybody. We've just got two more papers, the forward program and the action tracking. I just want to check, does any councillors have any questions on them? They're fairly self-explanatory. Okay. Councillor O'Neill, which one? Forward program?
Action tracking.
Oh, well, let's do the forward program first. I don't think anyone has any questions, so you're out of the hot seat. Oh, no, sorry, Councillor Foon. All right, well, in that case, I will ask Kim if you would come to the podium and address any questions we have. And Councillor Foon does.
Yeah, just the Climate and Sustainability Fund, like we've got one coming in March and May. Is there any way you can just outline the process on that? And also the Waste Minimisation Organics Fund, when that's coming?
So on the climate one, that's the one that we approved last time. So if you go back to that paper, you'll be able to see the process for that one.
Yep.
And what was the other one?
The Organics Fund for the Waste Minimisation.
So, councillors, the Climate and Sustainability Fund, we've got programmed into the March and May meetings. So that's delegated to the grant subcommittee. So the fund's open. We opened it last week. The website's live. We're pushing through with Alison's team to promote the fund. If we do get any applications, we'll try and process them as quick as we can, but we've got a 10th of February closing date for climate and sustainability. And then I think it's 24 March, closing date for the next one. And for the organics one, so that's the $100,000 large-scale organics project that I think is 24 March, coming to the May meeting. So your May meeting's got a big, long agenda. There's lots of papers. So yeah, that's the timing for those. We'll get the waste one up on our website later today, probably. Yep.
Cool. I'll move the paper. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Young. All those in favour, press 1. We're a very agreeable bunch. Thank you very much. And now actions tracking. We'll just go straight to questions, I think. We probably doesn't need to be introduced. Councillor O'Neill.
My only partai was around a resolution we passed last meeting, direct officers to evaluate access barriers of disabled people who engage in ending homelessness within working with Wellington City Council. This is in progress, and my question is just for public record. The response is it will be incorporated into the accessibility action plan. What time frame are we looking at for that?
So for the accessibility action plan, Melissa's just drawing up the scope, and we plan to have that in train later next year. But that will be part of the action plan formally, but informally, of course, prior to that, Melissa's working with our homelessness team to make sure that we consider those as an ongoing point. And certainly the officers working group are already working around inclusion around disability, and it's particularly evidence in the number of people who have age-related disabilities who are appearing in the homelessness space.
Cool. Thank you.
Cool, thanks. I will move that paper. Do I have a seconder? Councillor O'Neill. Sorry, I meant to ask you before. All those in favour, please press 1. It's at 8. Lovely, thank you everyone, that's carried. E tū mō te karakia. Unu here, ki te uru tapu nui. Kia wātia, kia mama, te nākau, te tinana, te wairua. E te ara takatu. Koe rā he rongo, whakaria aki ki runga. Kia wātia, ai rā kua wātia.